The first unit we're going to be covering in this video is going to be the SAM launcher. This is one of the most popular units in the support tree because everybody likes anti-aircraft and everybody likes a large anti-aircraft range and everybody likes anti-aircraft that focuses on jets. Why? Because most players, in pub matches especially, will use jets. SAM launchers are great against attacking enemy jets, and they're also good at attacking missiles. At max level, they'll be doing around 9 to 11 damage because it varies by tech tree. I think the max level of the Eastern SAM launchers gets 13, and I think other tech trees get 11, and missile damage also goes up phenomenally at 5.5, and this is throughout every tech tree. So it's very good against fixed-wing aircraft and missiles. Now, the SAM launcher is very bad for a few reasons, though. It cannot attack anything besides missiles or fixed-wing aircraft, and really, that is the biggest downside of it. It gets a very good AA range. It can ferry at level 2, aka the second tech level, which would be level 4 technically. And really, it's not a bad unit. It doesn't really get many debuffs compared to the mobile AA, which gets quite a few debuffs. But overall, this unit complements mobile AA very well because it does way more damage to fixed wing. So they kind of complement each other, and they both do damage to missiles. The SAM launcher will be great for defending artillery because a lot of players, especially in pub matches, like I said, would like to use jets. And so this is going to be an easy A tier for me because they do their job extremely well. They do a lot of damage to fixed wing and a lot of damage to missiles, and so a lot of times it might even mitigate the need for theater defense systems. The next unit we're going to be going over is going to be the Special Forces. Now, Special Forces are one of my new favorites because I finally figured out how much potential they have, but they're very great for just outright killing units, especially in terrain like jungles, forests, and mountains. They're stealth, and overall they can air assault, and they can do a lot of things that a lot of other infantry can't. They basically combine a lot of the features from other infantries, like from airborne, they can air assault, from marines, they can disembark without using ports, and they obviously get stealth, and they do massive damage and get massive buffs, and can storm. They get the storm ability, which means they can disregard enemy defense bonuses, so they're just completely deadly. They can catch enemies off guard, and a lot of times they won't expect it because not many people use this in pub matches especially. The best doctrine for this will be in Eastern, and a 10 stack in any doctrine can get over 200 damage easily in special terrain that they do very well in. This makes them so deadly, and they can just do so many things. The only thing they cannot do is take land. They're going to be an easy A tier for me because they're just so deadly in the right hands, and I would say they're a very solid unit overall. I just love personally using them. Now we have the Stealth Air Superiority Fighter. This is probably one of the things you actually don't want to get, in my opinion. They are good, especially in events, for scouting out people and doing a lot of damage to people and not being able to see them. But overall, regular ASF actually do the job pretty well, in my opinion. Stealth ASF are really expensive. They do a little bit more damage to jets. I think they do 20 damage or so, something like that. But overall, I would say they're not worth it because, as I said, ASF can do basically everything these can. The only thing is that these are stealth, and I would say that ASF are probably going to be your best bet. I'm going to put these at a C tier because I usually don't need to even use these. I always am really good with ASF just regularly because you don't really need to use stealth ASF if you can protect your regular ASF and even bait your enemies into trying to go for them and whatnot. And max level SAM launchers can also spot stealth units, so sometimes if you want to have your ASF patrolling, they might get spotted and also get killed, so be careful of that. But I would really focus on regular ASF as they seem like the better and more cheap option. Next, we're going to have the Stealth Bomber. This is a slightly better bomber than the regular bomber for a couple reasons. Obviously, it's stealth. The second reason is it does more damage generally depending on the tech tree. But actually, the Western regular bomber, I'm pretty sure, does on par damage with this thing. I think maybe even more damage than the B2 bomber. And so the stealth bomber is really good though, because it mitigates that risk of going in deep into enemy territory on land. Regular bombers would usually want to attack, like, they'd really be good for attacking an island. Like, let's say you're the US, New Zealand declares war on you, and they're really strong. You can have bombers set up near the country over the water. They won't be able to see them, and then they won't be able to see them until you're right over their country when you already got your bombs off, basically. Stealth bombers can attack units very far inland because they're stealth, and so they obviously won't be able to be seen. Let's say you're Germany and you have Mongolia as your enemy and he's got allies around him. You can just go right over Mongolia, not be seen, get your bombs off, and boom, you've done some infrastructural damage. Overall though, these are very expensive, and regular bombers can usually do what these things can, but they're cheaper. I would say these bombers though are pretty decent for doing stealth missions inland, but overall they're gonna fall into a C tier for me because they're kind of like Raptors. They're kind of like stealth ASF. Regular ASF and regular bombers can really do their job effectively for cheaper, and these just have some bonuses, but overall the cost is a lot. Next, we're going to be going into our third stealth aircraft. It's going to be the F-35 Lightning, or the Stealth Strike Fighter. This is actually one of the better stealth fighters in my opinion, because the damage buff is massive for these fighters. Stealth strike fighters can do, I think, about, if I had to guess, 15 damage per soft and hard target. And so these things are doing massive damage. They get one 5-stack can do, I think, 75 damage. And so this is actually one of the more useful stealth aircraft because of just how much damage it can do to both parties. And it can scout while stealth. It's a multi-role fighter, so it can do decent damage to regular fighters as well. And it can hit SAM launchers in a way that they can only get their defense off. As I said, the biggest weakness is stealth detection, and being seen by things like frigates and SAM launchers. But overall, the stealth strike fighters are the best stealth unit in my opinion for aircraft because their damage gets so buffed. Like, their damage goes up by so much, by a full 6 points of damage. So I would say these are actually going to go up to an A tier because they're the best stealth aircraft in the game in my opinion. And even though they cost more, they're worth the cost because, like, stealth strike fighters can do just about anything in this game. And what's better than a stealth strike fighter? Next up, we're going to be going into another one of the most popular, I think the last most popular unit in the game as far as this remaining list goes. It's going to be the regular strike fighter. This is one of the best air units in the game because of just what it can do. It can attack helicopters, jets, ships, and it can do decent damage to hard and soft targets, aka the same damage. Regardless of tech tree, this thing can do decent damage all around to a lot of different unit types, and especially in the European doctrine, it gets higher hit points, so they become tankier, and overall, they become very deadly because they can do just about anything you need them to. They're great for big landlocked nations or big nations that have a lot of land to cover, like China, the US, Russia, or even nations that have the benefit of the European doctrine, or nations that you think you need a decent jet air force for. Strike fighters, you really can't go wrong with them unless they're going up against experienced players who are using ASF, SAM launchers, and really strike fighters will falter there, but they do very well in just about everything they do, especially in the early game, in the mid game, and late game. And even SAM launchers, they can tank damage as long as there's not too many of them there. I'm not saying go attack SAM launchers because that would be a suicide mission, but strike fighters can do a lot of things that are just generally what you would want in a multi-role fighter. I would say they're probably the last S tier on this list because of just the things they can do, especially for a new player. Obviously a new player is not going to be able to use these as effectively, but they're pretty user friendly because they can just do so many different things. The next unit we're going to be going over is the last armored unit in this game, besides the theater defense system. Even though the theater defense system is a support unit, it's going to be the tank destroyer. The tank destroyers have one key role, and obviously it's in their name. They destroy tanks, aka armor. They counter armor very nicely, especially in cities. They get a huge buff in cities. Their best doctrine is European. They don't do too much damage against soft targets, but overall they're pretty decent against hard targets. Their biggest weaknesses is that they have a low HP count. Again, they have a very hard time getting ferried. I believe they don't get ferried till level 4. And overall, really the only areas they do well in are going to be cities for the most part. They do well obviously in other terrain, but really they're gonna lose a lot of armor battles, considering that a lot of armored units have higher hit point values than tank destroyers. Tank destroyers also don't have, I think, damage to air targets. I know not jets, maybe helicopters, but that's about it. I'm gonna put tank destroyers in the D tier because they have very limited uses and they're very situational, but overall they can be somewhat okay. The last support unit basically for anti-aircraft we're going to be going over today is going to be the theater defense system. This theater defense system, aka support system, is going to be your anti-missile designated anti-aircraft. This is for defending your homeland against large missiles like, ballistic missiles, ICBMs, and it will also be able to defend units on the front line from smaller missiles that can be launched from more things like cruise missiles. And overall, that's really their biggest use. Their worst qualities is that they are slow, they take a while to be air ferried, and their low speed makes them hard to maneuver, obviously. And one thing that I don't like about them is that their missile damage does not go up very much with each level, and they have a very large AA range, but they don't do much damage really to anything else besides missiles. The only thing they can damage besides missiles is going to be jets, and even then at max level they're only doing 4 damage, but they're very good if you have them in your cities to defend against large missiles. I would say they're going to be a C tier unit because it's something you want to have if your opponents are going for large missiles, and if you just want to have that security and a feeling of closure that your nation is protected and cannot be nuked overnight. The last ground unit in the game we're going to be going over is going to be the towed artillery. The towed artillery, in my opinion, is the worst artillery unit in the game because it has the lowest range of any artillery. It's designated as the best artillery for infantry, but it's got the smallest range, I think capping out at 75, and I think the biggest weakness of this is that obviously it's a soft target, so it can get killed by things like infantry and gunships very easily. It's got way less HP than other artillery, and it's a little bit slower because obviously it's manned and it has to be towed by trucks like in real life. And the only thing really going for towed artillery is that it's cheap and that it can air assault. But the air assaulting, I found out, I tested it in a couple games, and it's not as easy as you'd think to do that. It's way easier to have artillery moving around with radars permanently and having them like attack units along the way. You can move back, while you have to get extremely up close with towed artillery, and you can also not air assault radar with them. So I would say they're the worst artillery. I'm going to put them at a D tier because they just don't do what you really want to do in artillery. Artillery is something you think of long range, and these don't just have the range you really want in an artillery. The last unit we're going to be going over is an oddball. It's going to be the UAV, or unmanned aerial vehicle. The UAV is very good for a couple of reasons, in my opinion, even though I do not use it that much. It can scout, which means it can see the exact composition of enemy armies. It has a very far ferry range. It can reveal stealth. It has a cruise missile hardpoint, and it gets stealth at max level, as well as it gets a very decent range, though I'm pretty sure I already said that though. The biggest weaknesses of the UAV are that they are very slow compared to other aircraft, and they have very, 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 very low hit points. Though, when these get very good or when they get stealth, and you can just fly over all of your enemy cities, because they're pretty cheap to build, and you can see exactly what they have and where, and you can have so many of these at once. You can scout multiple front lines at one time, though you have to have them directly over where you want to scout. And overall, these are a pretty good unit for getting direct intelligence compared to things like radar. You can scout exactly what your enemy has, what compositions they're using, what level their units are, where they are, and honestly, that puts it at an A tier for me, because if you use it right, your enemies won't expect it, they won't be able to see it, and especially with the stealth, they'll be very hard to find, and you'll just have intel that is game breaking for you and your team if you're playing as a team. So guys, I really had fun making this series. I made it in about 2 hours, so it didn't take that long, but it was a lot longer than I expected. I expected it to be one video, but it ended up being 4 parts because I realized how long one video would have been. I hope you all enjoyed this series. I really enjoyed making it, and again, please don't take any of these things personally. Again, these are just my opinions and what I've experienced in the game and what I like to use, what I think downsides are, and some just pure game stats. But overall, I enjoyed making this series. I hope you all enjoyed it as well. Please consider subscribing. It really helps my channel out. It's the single biggest thing that helps my channel grow. Leave a like if you liked the video. If you disliked it, leave a dislike. In the comments, say why you liked it or why you didn't like it. And if you have a question, write it down below. And if you just want to say hi, you can also do that. I try to react and respond to every single one. And if I don't get to you, don't worry, I will eventually. So guys, I hope you have a beautiful day. Nick out. I will see you in the next con series.